Good morning, everybody. I hope you've had a really lovely bank holiday weekend. So we're getting towards the end of the school holidays now, and we might be looking ahead to the upcoming term and our scheduling, looking at our routine. And for me, I always think of September almost like a new year. Many of us do work around an academic year, particularly if you have children as well. So this can be a good time to have an overview of your whole business. So that is what we've been focusing on this month of August. And in today's talk, I wanted to focus on the maybe counterintuitive idea that sometimes it can be a good idea to let a class go. Now, if you're trying to build your business and grow it, it can feel counterintuitive if you're trying to grow to potentially offer fewer classes. But in my own experience and what I've seen for other people, there are some times when, in fact, it will help your business grow more and it will help you create a more sustainable business, which is obviously the focus of all our talks, and creating a business that really works for you by letting one or maybe more classes go. So the first reason really is how much time and energy do you have? For all of us, we have limited time and energy. And so really we want to spend our budget of time and energy in the wisest way possible. And it's definitely been my own learning curve that offering tons of classes is not always the wisest use of time and energy. Because what we need to realize is that, as I've mentioned in a previous talk, that our teaching hours are not our only working hours. So we might think, yeah, I could easily teach 12, 15 classes a week. It would fit in. I have time and energy to teach those classes. But what we also need to factor in is the time and energy required to make those classes successful. So that's all the marketing, all the planning, all the additional things that we might want to add in terms of aftercare for our students, creating little videos, information sheets, maybe little recordings of relaxations, all these things that could make our classes really unique and offer really good value, to give a really good service takes quite a bit of time and energy. And the marketing as well. If we are running lots of different classes that are trying to reach slightly different audiences, then we need to have a separate marketing plan for each of those classes. And we need to have that consistently week on week, whether that's Facebook posts, our social media, maybe making little reels, newsletters, blog posts, like all of these things to keep our presence, engaging in our local community groups. It may also be in person, engaging with other local businesses, letting them know that you're around, maybe connecting with local schools, all of these things, all of our networking that we ideally want to do for our classes to really help them thrive. So do you have the time and energy to do that for all the classes that you're currently teaching? And if not, then you're going to need to make some choices about which ones you keep and maybe which ones you let go, at least for the time being. Now, if you are teaching several classes and they're all aimed at the same demographic, that might make your marketing a lot easier. But if your classes is a mixture of, like, you might do a mum and baby class, and then you might do a more say a strong vinyasa class for a certain demographic. You might also offer a chair class aimed at older people. These are all completely different marketing plans that you need. So that would be my starting point, is look at everything you're doing. And when you look at your schedule for the week, you want to think about not only the classes that you're teaching, but do you also have other work that you do? Do you have other commitments? You know, really hour by hour, plan out your week of what all your commitments are, and be really honest about the time and energy you have. Because if we do fewer classes, but make them really successful, then you could earn the same, if not more, than the large number of classes, all earning a little bit. And then you're saving some time and energy as well. So this is what we're working towards. So that can be your starting point. Now, if you are needing just from time and energy to drop a class, you're going to have to make some choices about which ones. Or it might not be that time and energy is an issue, but you might find that you've got classes on your schedule that are not really working for you, and you might feel a bit stuck with them. So we're also looking at some of these other reasons too. So the next reason on my list may be that there's a class that you teach and you're no longer really loving the focus of that class. It might be a particular style that you feel you've moved on from. So it might have been, say, in your younger days, you really loved these kind of strong, dynamic, very physical classes, and that was the right thing for you at the time. And maybe now, later on, you feel that that's not your real passion. It's maybe not the right yoga for your body anymore. And then maybe there's a conflict in the integrity of teaching something that you feel is not really right for you. So you're totally allowed to change your style and not teach that anymore if it's not the right thing for you. And there are other teachers that do that. You're not necessarily letting people down. So if you feel that you no longer want to teach a certain style, then you're allowed to let that go and teach something that's different. It might be that you've gradually evolved over time anyway, but if you feel a little bit trapped by serving a certain group of people, a particular style of yoga that doesn't really light you up anymore, then I would suggest that maybe it's time to change that. And it could be that you hand that class over to another teacher, so they can carry on doing that. Or you might have a discussion with your students and say, you know, actually, my passion is this now. Do you want to join me in a different style? You know, these are all conversations to have, but just being really honest with yourself about what are the things that really light you up? What is it that you love teaching? And the things that you don't love teaching is not really going to serve you that well. And ultimately, it's not going to serve your students that well, because consciously or unconsciously, they'll pick up the energy around that. It could also be that you started teaching a class because it matched a phase of life that you were in. So it might be that you trained in mum and baby yoga after having children, and that was a real passion of yours and you've loved it for years. But maybe now your kids are in secondary school or moving on to university, and maybe just that passion is not as high as it was, or it's not so much your interest, and you'd rather move on to teen yoga, for example. That might be something that you want to do instead. So again, if it's if it's something that you're not loving, that you don't feel excited about teaching, that you don't want to keep reading up on and watching other people's videos on, or, you know, that constant interest and development, if that's not there anymore, again, it's perfectly fine to let that go. And again, it's not about letting people down. You can always find teachers to take over a class if you have something that's working well, or you can wind a class down and give people plenty of notice. So there can be a couple of reasons why it might be the right time to let something go. If it's just a style that doesn't suit you anymore, if it's a class that you're not loving teaching. So number 3, now a class may not be working for you because of logistics. And I've definitely had this in the past as well. So it might be a class that when you're there, you enjoy teaching, but maybe the overall picture of it is that it's actually more hassle than it's worth. You know, if the requirements of teaching that class is a long or difficult journey each way, and if you're having to schlep tons of equipment and worry about parking, and you know, or maybe you have to run around different places picking up keys, dropping them off, you know, if it feels like a big hassle, it takes too much of your time. You know, you might be teaching a class that's anything between an hour and a half, but you could easily add a couple more hours on top of that if the travel time is a lot. There's a lot of logistical faff. If you're having to get there really early because you've got to move loads of furniture, set up the class, and then pack down again. You know, these things can be worth it if it's say a more extended class or a workshop or something where people are paying more, you're there for a few hours and it's a bit more of an event and you're getting paid well for it. That might work out. But maybe for an hourly class weekly, if there's all of this hassle around it and it's taking a lot of your time, then effectively your hourly rate has been cut a lot because you've got to account for all this other time that's not teaching the class. So that might be a reason to drop that particular class. It could be maybe the time of day as well, that logistically it makes it complicated for you in terms of how you're fitting in other things in your life or how it affects your travel. Or maybe that, you know, you used to feel quite happy doing a late night class or a super early morning class, but over the years, as your body changes, your energy changes, or other things in your life change, it might then just be a bridge too far to do that kind of thing. So just being really honest with yourself about what works in your schedule and the energy that you have at times of day and other commitments that you have, that we're not in this constant rushing, feeling a bit stressed against the clock, and you know, maybe struggling physically carrying stuff and traveling and all of those things. That over time this might have been something that worked really well for you to begin with, but maybe it isn't anymore. So if it is a class that you love teaching and the logistics are a problem, then, you know, possibly you might be able to change the location or the time, or maybe some of the terms around the venue that you work in. But if those things feel like it's not really going to be viable, then that might be a really good reason to let that class go and focus your time and energy on other classes and making them much more successful. And those students that you have in that class, if they're on your mailing list, you can still let them know about other classes that you're running. And they may, over time, migrate to other classes that you do if they love you as a teacher. So, you know, the logistics, sometimes that's a good reason to let something go. And kind of tied in with that, and it is something that I see posted up on other Facebook groups about teachers struggling maybe with the working conditions of particular classes, that maybe there's too much stress, maybe there's too many internal politics, maybe not being treated very well. So this could be maybe at a larger studio, that there can be too much stress involved with working at that particular venue. Maybe your terms and conditions are not very clear. Maybe there's some practice there that feels unfair. Again, there can be logistical things. Maybe you're expected to do more marketing than you feel is reasonable for your remuneration. Maybe you're expected to clean the studio afterwards. There can be all these sort of terms and conditions in certain venues that just mean that that's not working for you, that either it feels unfair or you're not being paid sufficiently for the work that you're doing, the reward isn't great. Or it may be that you're hiring a venue, and I've seen this come up as well, and the people managing the venue, like it might be a community hall, they might be messing you around. They might be not letting you have the heating on when you need it. They might be unreliable about showing up to unlock so you can get in. There can be all of these things. And again, there can be the occasional incidents. We're always going to have issues from time to time, but if this is a persistent issue and there's ongoing problems, then again, that could be the time where, if you're reviewing all the classes that you teach, if there's one that just is either a heart sink or actually gets your heart palpitating because it's just like, oh God, I've got to go there and deal with these people and it's stressful, or what's going to go wrong this evening, or if you're bracing yourself for a problem every time you go, it's not going to be great for your nervous system. It's not going to be supporting your teaching. And we went self-employed for a reason, which is generally to sort of avoid some of these issues of being at the mercy of your employer, and how you're treated at work, that we would have a little bit more control, hopefully. So if this is a situation for you and it's an ongoing thing and it doesn't look like it can be resolved, again, that might be a class that you're better off saving your time and energy to pour into other classes that you teach where you can get more reward. So again, it's just taking that time to reflect and be honest about how you feel and what works for you and what your needs are. And I've definitely been in a situation where I've been trying to make something work for a period of time. And in the end, you realize, actually, this is never going to be a situation that I'm happy with. And I'm just trying to make something fit that doesn't. And it's better to let that go and put that time and energy into something that you're going to feel much more comfortable with. And then the final reason, again, that I hear quite often, and it's definitely been an issue for me as well, is about a class generally isn't profitable enough. That's often a reason why people may think about, is it worth carrying on this class because I'm not really making any money at it. So there can be so many reasons why this is the case. And some of them will be the things that we've looked at already. So it could be, when we go back to the first thing, the time and energy. So if we're trying to fill too many classes with completely different demographics, different groups that we're trying to appeal to, we might just be spreading ourselves too thin and just not be marketing well enough to fill the class. So again, this is where you want to choose the things you love the most, or choose the things which also have the most potential. So again, if we're looking at maybe working under someone else's umbrella and you're getting a small percentage, you could work really hard and fill that class, and even still, the return wouldn't be great. Or you could maybe run your own class, which is a bigger risk and initially might not feel very profitable. But if you put the time and energy into making that grow, and if that was full, what would your return be on that? And that could then be a way that you can decide which class is the better one to let go and which is the one that's better to focus on. So you want to check, are you actually doing sufficient marketing to fill the class to make it worth doing? Again, you might want to check that it's a good match for the people you want to serve. If you are wanting to reach people who generally have a full-time job, then obviously you've got to put it at a time and a day that's going to fit them. So that is an obvious one, but you don't want to be trying to reach certain people and then putting a class on that doesn't suit them at that day and time. So that might be one thing to check. You might also want to check, are your prices sufficient? Particularly for people who've been teaching quite a long time, then it's quite hard sometimes to feel comfortable putting your prices up. But if our costs are going up, then our prices need to reflect that. So that might be a reason why it's not generating enough income. It might be that your overheads are super high where you are. And I know in London, this can definitely be an issue, that renting a space can be really difficult. Or it can be easy to find, but not one that's particularly affordable. So we need to be looking at the reasons why a particular class is not lucrative enough, and are there things that we can change and improve to make that work, or are there restrictions in place that mean ultimately it's never going to break a certain, like there's a ceiling on what you could earn from that class? And if that's the case, then it might be that that's a good reason to let that class go, that if there isn't the potential to make it earn enough to make it worth your while, that could be a reason to let a class go. And the other thing, I suppose, to balance out in all of that is to consider whether there are other benefits that you get from that class that are not directly financial. So, and particularly because we're in a Yoga for Cancer group, and this comes up quite often as a question on the trainings, is this idea of volunteering. And generally, I steer people away from volunteering because we're professionals and we should get paid for what we do, as any other professional in cancer does. But there can be times and occasions when there are other benefits in lieu that have value to you that make it worth doing, even if the pay is low or you're doing it on a voluntary basis. So you might want to just add that into the mix, that if you're doing a low cost or a voluntary class, but you are allowed, for example, to, when they finished their free course that they get with you, that you could then invite them into a paid class, well, then your voluntary or your low cost class could act as a funnel into a paid class, and that could make it worth your while. So we need to look at these things in the round. But yeah, if you're putting a lot of your time and your energy into a class for very little return, there's only so long that we can do that before we either start feeling resentful, or it saps our joy, or we can start to get towards burnout. Because if we're not earning enough from a class, often then I see teachers feeling like they have to teach more and more classes to try and make up the income that they need. And so my invitation to you today is to have an overview of your whole week, all your commitments, looking at the time and energy you have available for your teaching, looking at what the income is that you need, and whether you actually would be better off in terms of freeing up some time and earning more by dropping one or maybe more of your classes. And as an example from my own life, because I always have this problem of saying yes to everything that I find interesting or that I think is a good idea. And during lockdown, I started a whole new business with a colleague, which was an online yoga studio, effectively, women's yoga hub. I still think it's a great business idea. But between us, we were teaching 10 classes a week. So that was 5 each. And there was a whole variety of different classes, all focusing on women's health. So some menstrual, pregnancy, postnatal, mum and baby, all of those things, general well woman. And on top of that, I also have my reflexology business. And then I also have my teacher training business. And yeah, it made sense in lockdown to be doing that because we couldn't get in the studio and I wasn't really able to do my reflexology because I weren't allowed to be hands-on. And it worked for a while. But as things opened up and I started getting back to my normal life, I was effectively trying to run 3 different businesses, which in hindsight is kind of madness. And, when I had some business coaching, she just said, well, maybe that's like one business too many. So I just had to choose, out of these 3 different businesses, which to me all felt connected and relevant. But in terms of running a business and the market I was trying to reach, there was too much to try and make all of them really successful. So in the end, we decided after 2 or 3 years that we were going to close that whole online business, and we gave everyone a month's notice. We sent out newsletters. We let them know about other classes that we were doing and other things that we were doing. And then we had to wind that up. And since I did that, I'm now earning a lot more because I can put my time and energy into fewer things and make them more successful. So that was a big learning curve. And it was the right thing to do at the time. And then it was no longer the right thing to do. And so we decided to wind that up. So I kind of wanted to give that as a reassuring example of sometimes you can close an entire business and still do better overall. It freed up some time and energy for me, so I could get more rest, so I could have more time just to get inspiration to write blogs and newsletters, that I'd have more time to plan and be strategic and do marketing and to offer more within the businesses that I was running. So it gave me the time to set up this Facebook group and run talks and do my free mini trainings and sort of do all the things that I do in my Yoga for Cancer that I didn't have the time or energy to do before. And hopefully these are all things that you're finding useful and interesting. So although it can be scary, the idea that we would start to shut down bits of our business, it can absolutely liberate you to be more inspired, to have more energy, more focus, and more rest as well. We need our rest, so that we create a business that really works for us so that we can keep doing it, and that we have more to give to the people that we work with, so that they benefit too. So we want to create this win-win situation, where we have something that works for us, and that our students, our clients, get the best of us, not us feeling wrung out, exhausted, resentful. That's not going to be the best energy to bring into our classes. So I hope that's given you a little bit of food for thought, maybe some inspiration to have a review of everything you're teaching. And if there were any little aha moments or things that resonated or rang true for you, then please do post them in the comments. It's always lovely to hear what people connect with and what rings true for you. And I'm going to wish you very best of the last week of August, and I will be here same time next week. So have a lovely rest of your week. Take care.